Little girl cried, "Save my grandmother." To a Hell's Angel. What happened next made everyone touched. Sunlight streamed through the faded curtains of the modest living room, casting warm rectangles across the worn wooden floor. 9-year-old Ellie Carter hummed softly as she dusted the collection of framed photographs on the mantel. Her small fingers worked carefully around each frame, lingering on the one that showed her parents smiling at the beach. "They'd be so proud of you," Ruth said from her rocking chair, her knitting needles clicking gently in her lap. Though her hands moved slowly now, they never seemed to stop working. Ellie looked up, her brown eyes catching the light. "Do you think so, Grandma?" "I know so, sweetheart." Ruth's voice was soft but certain, like everything about her. At 72, yes, Ruth Carter's face was a map of gentle wrinkles, each one earned through years of smiling and worrying and loving fiercely. Not every girl your age would be so helpful around the house. "I like helping you," Ellie said simply, moving to the next photograph. This one showed her as a baby, cradled in her grandmother's arms. "Besides, it's just us now." Ruth's needles paused momentarily. She watched her granddaughter with eyes that held equal measures of love and concern. Since Ellie's parents had died in the accident 2 years ago, they had formed their own little world together in this small house. It wasn't much, but they made it work. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. "How about we bake some cookies after you finish dusting?" Ruth suggested, or changing the subject. "Those chocolate chip ones you like." Ellie's face brightened. "Can I mix the dough this time?" "Of course you can. You're becoming quite the baker." The little girl finished her dusting with renewed energy, then skipped into the kitchen. Ruth followed more slowly, one hand braced against the wall for support. She didn't let Ellie see how much effort it took. In the kitchen, Ellie dragged a step stool to the counter while Ruth gathered ingredients from the cupboards. The afternoon sun made everything in the yellow kitchen seem golden. "Grandma, can you tell me the story about how you and Grandpa met?" Ellie asked, carefully measuring flour into a bowl. Ruth chuckled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Again? You've heard that story 100 times." "It's my favorite," Ellie insisted, adding a bit too much flour and quickly trying to scoop some back out. "Well," Ruth began, reaching for the sugar. "I was working at the library, shelving books in the history section. Your grandpa came in looking for a book on World War II for a school project. And he kept coming back every day even after he finished his project," Ellie continued, grinning. She knew all the beats of this story by heart. "That's right, for 2 whole weeks, checking out one book after another." Ruth laughed softly at the memory. "I finally asked him if he was planning to read the entire history section. And he said," Ellie started. "He said, 'Only if that's how long it takes to get the courage to ask you to dinner,'" Ruth finished. Her cheeks flushed slightly, even after all these years. Ellie giggled, dropping chocolate chips into the mixture. "That's so romantic." "It was," Ruth agreed, leaning against the counter. "Sometimes the best people come into your life when you're not looking for them." They worked side by side, Ruth guiding Ellie's hands when needed, but mostly letting her try on her own. The kitchen filled with the smell of vanilla and butter as they chatted about Ellie's school project and the neighbor's new puppy. As Ellie scooped dough onto the baking sheet, she said, "Mom used to make cookies with me, too." Ruth nodded. "She learned from me, just like you're learning now. That's how love continues, Ellie. We pass it along." When the cookies were in the oven, Ellie helped Ruth back to her chair in the living room. The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows now. Would you like some tea while we wait? Ellie asked, proud to be taking care of her grandmother. That would be lovely, dear. Ellie had just returned with 2 cups of tea when she noticed something was wrong. Ruth's face had gone pale, and her hand was pressed against her chest. The teacup trembled in her other hand. Grandma? Ellie set the cups down quickly. Are you okay? Ruth tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. I'm just a little short of breath, sweetheart. But then Ruth gasped suddenly, the teacup slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. Her breathing became labored, coming in short, painful gasps. Grandma! Ellie cried, panic rising in her voice as she grabbed Ruth's hand. Ruth's eyes were wide with fear, her fingers clutching desperately at her chest. Can't breathe, she managed to whisper. Ellie froze for just a moment, but her young mind struggling to process what was happening. Then something inside her snapped into focus. Her grandmother needed help. Now. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched her grandmother struggle for breath. The peaceful afternoon had shattered like the teacup on the floor, its broken pieces catching the fading sunlight. Grandma, what's happening? Ellie's voice came out high and thin. She clutched Ruth's hand, feeling how cold it had become in just moments. Ruth tried to speak but could only manage a wheezing gasp. Her lips were turning a frightening shade of blue around the edges. With trembling fingers, she pointed toward the small table by the door where the phone sat. You want me to call someone? Ellie asked, already moving toward the phone. I'll call 911. They'll know what to do. Ruth nodded weakly, her chest heaving with the effort to draw in air. Her normally bright eyes were wide with fear, something Ellie had never seen before. Grandma had always been the brave one, the one who checked under the bed for monsters and kissed scraped knees to make them better. Ellie grabbed the old corded phone with shaking hands and punched in the 3 numbers she had been taught to memorize for emergencies. The dial tone buzzed in her ear, but nothing happened. It's not working. Panic rose in her voice as she pressed the buttons harder, as if that might help. She jiggled the cord where it connected to the wall. Grandma, the phone's dead! Ruth made a small, desperate sound. With what seemed like enormous effort, she raised her hand and pointed toward the front door. You want me to go get help? Ellie asked, tears welling in her eyes. And the thought of leaving her grandmother alone terrified her. But staying might be worse if she couldn't do anything to help. Ruth managed a single word, her voice barely audible. Go. Ellie hesitated, torn between staying with the only family she had left and running for help that might save her. But I don't want to leave you alone. Ruth's eyes locked with hers, somehow conveying both love and urgency despite her distress. She tried to nod, her hand making a weak, shooing motion. I'll be right back with help, I promise, Ellie said, squeezing her grandmother's hand one more time before letting go. Just keep breathing, Grandma. Please keep breathing. She ran to the kitchen first, grabbing a glass of water and bringing it back. Here, try to take a sip, she urged, but Ruth could barely lift her head. Or the water dribbled down her chin, and her breathing seemed to grow more labored with each passing second. Ellie knew then that water wouldn't help. Something was terribly wrong, and she needed to find an adult who would know what to do. Mrs. Wilson next door was a nurse, but Ellie remembered she was away visiting her daughter. Mr. Peterson across the street had a car. Maybe he could drive them to the hospital. I'm going to get Mr. Peterson, she said firmly, trying to sound braver than she felt. Hold on, Grandma. Ruth's eyes were starting to flutter closed, which scared Ellie more than anything else. She patted her grandmother's cheek gently. Grandma, stay awake, okay? I'll be super fast. With one last glance at her grandmother's struggling form, Ellie raced to the front door. In her hurry, she didn't stop to put on shoes. Or the screen door banged behind her as she sprinted down the short walkway and out to the street. The afternoon sun was still bright, making her squint as she looked desperately up and down the street. There was no sign of Mr. Peterson, but several cars were passing by. "Help!" she shouted, waving her arms frantically at a blue sedan. "Please help! My grandma can't breathe!" The car slowed slightly, but then sped up again, continuing down the street. Ellie felt a stab of disbelief. Hadn't they heard her? Couldn't they see how scared she was? She ran further into the street, her bare feet scraping against the rough asphalt. A red minivan approached, and Ellie positioned herself more directly in its path, though still at a safe distance. "Please stop! I need help!" she cried, tears streaming down her face now. "My grandmother is really sick!" The minivan swerved around her, honking once as it passed. Ellie could see the driver, a woman talking on her phone, glance at her briefly in the rearview mirror. But she didn't stop. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as another car approached. This one slowed down more significantly, and for a moment Ellie's hopes soared. But then it too drove past, the elderly man behind the wheel shaking his head apologetically. Ellie stood in the middle of the street, her small chest heaving with sobs. Her grandmother was dying inside their house, and nobody would stop to help them. Her bare feet stung from the hot pavement, but she barely noticed the pain. "Please!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "Someone help! My grandmother can't breathe!" Cars continued to pass. Some slowed, others didn't. But none stopped. So Ellie felt smaller and more alone than she ever had in her life, even after her parents died. Then, at least, she'd had Grandma to hold her. Now she might lose her, too. In the distance, she heard the rumble of an approaching motorcycle. The deep rumble of the motorcycle echoed through the quiet neighborhood street. Marcus Hale slowed as he approached the four-way stop, his weathered hands gripping the handlebars of his Harley. The afternoon sun beat down on his leather vest, the patches marking him as a Hell's Angel catching the light. His day had been long, his business in town nearly finished. All he wanted now was the open road back to his place. The sound of crying pierced through the rumble of his engine. Marcus frowned, scanning the street until he spotted the source, a small girl standing barefoot in the middle of the road. Her face streaked with tears, arms waving frantically. Cars slowed around her, but none stopped. He watched as a silver sedan swerved around her, the driver not even bothering to roll down a window. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. Something about the pure desperation on the girl's face made him ease off the throttle. Marcus wasn't one to get involved in other people's problems. Life had taught him that lesson the hard way. But leaving a kid alone in the street? That wasn't right. He guided his motorcycle towards the curb, cutting the engine. The sudden silence amplified the girl's sobs. She couldn't be more than 9 or 10, wearing shorts and a faded t-shirt, her dark hair falling out of what might have been neat braids that morning. "Hey," he called, his voice gruff from years of cigarettes and hard living. "What, you okay?" The girl spun toward him, and he saw a flash of fear cross her face as she took in his appearance, the tattoos snaking up his arms, the scars on his knuckles, the leather vest with its skull patches. For a second, Marcus thought she might run from him. People often did. Instead, she rushed toward him, stopping just short of his bike. "Please," she gasped between sobs. "My grandma can't breathe. I tried calling 911, but our phone's not working and nobody will stop to help and I don't know what to do." The words tumbled out in a desperate rush. Marcus glanced around, half expecting to see an adult appear to handle this. The street remained empty, except for the occasional passing car, but he looked back at the girl's tear-stained face and felt something shift inside him. A memory of being young and scared with nobody stopping to help. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. The girl pointed shakily toward a small house a few doors down. "In there. Please hurry." Marcus hesitated only a moment. He wasn't anyone's hero. He wasn't even anyone's friend most days. But this kid was terrified, and someone was in trouble. "What's your name?" he asked, swinging his leg over his bike. "Ellie," she said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Ellie Carter." "Okay, Ellie, I'm Marcus." He stood, towering over her small frame. "Lead the way." Relief flooded her face, fresh tears spilling over. "Thank you," she whispered. She turned and started running back towards the house, her bare feet slapping against the pavement. Marcus followed, his heavy boots making dull thuds beside her light steps. The contrast wasn't lost on him. This tiny, vulnerable kid trusting a man most adults crossed the street to avoid. "She was folding laundry, and then she couldn't breathe," Ellie explained as they moved, looking back to make sure he was still following. "She told me to get help." Marcus nodded, picking up his pace. Medical emergencies weren't his specialty, but he'd seen enough in his time with the club to know the basics. If it was a heart attack or something similar, every minute counted. "How long has she been like this?" he asked. "Not long? Maybe 5 minutes?" Ellie's voice wavered with uncertainty. "It feels like forever." They reached the small yard in front of her house. The grass needed cutting. And the porch sagged slightly in the middle. Marcus took the 3 steps in one stride, reaching for the screen door. "She's in the living room," Ellie said, squeezing past him to lead the way. Before stepping inside, Marcus paused, aware of how he must look to anyone else. A Hell's Angel following a child into her home. But the girl's desperate eyes left no room for hesitation. "I'll help however I can," he said simply, and followed Ellie inside. Marcus stepped into the small living room and immediately spotted an elderly woman slumped in an armchair. Her face was pale, her lips taking on a bluish tinge as she struggled for each breath. A basket of half-folded laundry sat beside her, a testament to the normalcy that had existed just minutes before. "Grandma!" Ellie cried, rushing to her side. "What, I brought help!" Marcus crossed the room in 3 long strides, his leather vest creaking as he knelt beside the woman. Up close, he could see the sheen of sweat on her forehead and the way her hands trembled as they clutched at her chest. "Ma'am?" His voice came out gentler than usual. "I'm Marcus. Can you tell me what's happening?" The woman, Ruth, he assumed, tried to speak but could only manage a strangled gasp. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, held a certain clarity as they met his. Recognition flashed across her face for just a moment, then disappeared as another wave of pain hit her. Marcus had seen enough emergencies in his life to know this was serious. He quickly scanned the room, taking in the details. The dated furniture worn with care, family photos lining the walls, or the small TV in the corner playing a game show with the volume turned low. A home that had seen better days, but was filled with love. "Ellie, where's your phone?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady despite the urgency he felt. "It's not working," Ellie said, her small hands gripping her grandmother's arm. "I tried already." Marcus pulled his cell phone from his pocket. "I've got one. What's your address?" 417 Maple Street, Ellie answered immediately. He dialed 911, keeping his eyes on Ruth as the dispatcher answered. "I need an ambulance at 417 Maple Street," he said clearly. "Elderly woman having trouble breathing, possible heart attack." He listened to the dispatcher's questions, answering with the limited information he had. "Yes, she's conscious but can't speak. Breathing is labored. Lips are turning blue." As he spoke, Aunt Marcus gently took Ruth's wrist, feeling for her pulse. It was rapid and irregular. He'd seen enough club brothers go through medical emergencies to recognize the signs of serious distress. "They're sending help," he told Ellie after hanging up. "Should be here in about 8 minutes." Ellie's eyes widened with fear. Is that too long? Marcus looked at Ruth, whose breathing seemed to be growing more difficult by the second. "We'll help her until they get here," he said firmly. "First, let's make her more comfortable." He carefully adjusted Ruth's position, easing her forward slightly to open her airway better. "Is she on any medications?" Ellie nodded and pointed to a small basket on the kitchen counter. "Those are her pills. She takes the heart ones every morning and night." Marcus quickly scanned the labels, noting several cardiac medications. He returned to Ruth's side, kneeling so he was at eye level with her. "Ruth," he said clearly, "help is coming. Try to take slow breaths if you can." He demonstrated, exaggerating his own breathing. "In through your nose if possible, out through your mouth." Ruth's eyes locked onto his, and she made a visible effort to follow his instructions. Though still labored, her breathing seemed to find a slightly steadier rhythm. "That's good," Marcus encouraged. "Just like that." He turned to Ellie, who stood nearby with tears streaming down her face. "Ellie, can you get a glass of water? And maybe a damp cloth for your grandma's forehead?" Giving the girl a task served two purposes. It would help Ruth and give Ellie something to focus on besides her fear. She nodded quickly and hurried to the kitchen. "Marsh, she's a brave kid," Marcus said quietly to Ruth, whose eyes had followed her granddaughter. "You've done a good job with her." Ruth managed the smallest of nods, a tear slipping down her weathered cheek. Ellie returned with the water and cloth. Marcus showed her how to gently dab her grandmother's forehead. "Just like that," he said. "You're doing great, kiddo." "Will she be okay?" Ellie whispered, her voice breaking. Marcus met her eyes honestly. "The ambulance is coming, and we're doing everything right. Your grandma is fighting hard." He glanced at Ruth, whose gaze held a mix of pain and determination. "She's strong, just like you." In the distance, the wail of a siren cut through the afternoon quiet, growing steadily louder. "Hear that?" Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. "Your help is almost here." Minutes passed like hours as Marcus kept his eyes fixed on Ruth's struggle for breath. The distant wail of sirens hadn't grown any closer. If anything, they seemed to be fading. He checked his watch and frowned. "They should be here by now," he muttered, glancing towards the window. The street remained empty, no flashing lights in sight. Ellie looked up from where she sat, holding her grandmother's hand. "Where are they?" Her voice trembled with fear. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed 911 again. After a brief conversation, he hung up, his expression grim. "There's been a big accident on Highway 16. All the ambulances are tied up. They're sending one from the next county over, but it'll be at least 20 more minutes." Ruth's breathing had become more strained, each gasp more desperate than the last. Marcus knew they didn't have 20 minutes. "We can't wait," he said firmly. He crouched down beside Ruth's chair. "Ma'am, we need to get you to the hospital now. I'm going to help you to my bike." Ruth's eyes widened with alarm. Ellie shook her head frantically. "Grandma can't ride on a motorcycle. She can barely sit up." Marcus nodded, thinking quickly. He pulled out his phone again, but this time didn't call emergency services. Instead, he pressed a single contact labeled Diesel. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "What's up, Hale?" "Diesel, I need help. Emergency. I'm at 417 Maple Street with an elderly woman in respiratory distress. Ambulance is delayed. I need transport and an escort to Memorial Hospital now." There was a brief pause before Diesel responded. "On it. 3 minutes." The line went dead. Then Marcus turned back to Ellie, whose eyes were wide with questions. "My friends are coming to help," he explained. "They'll get us to the hospital faster than waiting for the ambulance." "Your biker friends?" Ellie asked softly. Marcus nodded. "They may look scary, but they're good people in a crisis." He moved to the window, scanning the street. "We need to get your grandmother ready to move. Do you have a blanket we can wrap around her?" Ellie ran to grab a quilt from the couch. Together, they gently tucked it around Ruth, whose eyes remained fixed on Marcus with a mixture of fear and trust. "It's going to be okay," he told her, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We'll get you help soon." The rumble of motorcycles filled the air, growing louder until it seemed to vibrate through the small house. Ellie peeked out the window. "There are lots of them," she whispered. Outside, 5 motorcycles pulled up in front of the house. A giant of a man with a thick beard dismounted from the lead bike and headed for the door. Behind him, a woman with silver-streaked black hair climbed out of a pickup truck that had arrived with them. Marcus opened the door before they could knock. "Diesel, Maggie. Thanks for coming." "What's the situation?" the woman asked, brushing past Marcus and heading straight for Ruth. She knelt beside the chair, her eyes assessing with professional calm. "She's struggling to breathe, possible heart attack," Marcus explained. "Ambulance is delayed at least 20 minutes, Maggie nodded. "I was a nurse before I retired. Her color's not good." She looked at Ruth directly. "Ma'am, we're going to get you to the hospital. The truck will be more comfortable than waiting here. Is that all right with you?" Ruth managed the smallest of nods. "Good," Maggie said. She turned to the large man. "Diesel, we need to move her very carefully. Marcus, you take her legs. I'll support her head and shoulders." Working together, they lifted Ruth gently from the chair. She was lighter than Marcus expected, fragile in his arms. They carried her outside to the waiting pickup, where a makeshift bed of blankets had already been arranged in the back seat. "Ellie, grab anything your grandmother might need at the hospital," Marcus instructed. "Her purse, ID, medication list." The little girl darted back inside, returning moments later with a small handbag and the basket of medications. Vin Diesel helped her climb into the truck beside her grandmother. "We'll escort you," Marcus told Maggie. "Clear the way so you don't have to stop." "Lead the way, Hale," Diesel rumbled, mounting his bike again. Within moments, they had formed a protective convoy around the pickup. 2 bikes in front, 3 behind, with Marcus at the lead. He gunned his engine. "Memorial Hospital," he called out to the others. "Fastest route, no stops." The procession pulled away from the curb, engines roaring as they accelerated down the quiet street. In his side mirror, Marcus caught a glimpse of Ellie's face through the truck window, her palm pressed against the glass as they raced toward the hospital, her grandmother's life hanging in the balance. The automatic doors of Memorial Hospital slid open with a whoosh as Marcus carried Ruth inside, and Maggie and Ellie hurrying alongside. The bright fluorescent lights made Ruth look even paler than before. "Help! We need help right now!" Marcus called out, his deep voice echoing through the busy emergency room. A nurse looked up from behind the reception desk, taking in the scene. The tattooed man in leather holding an elderly woman, the small girl with tear-streaked cheeks, and the unusual group of bikers hovering near the entrance. She grabbed a nearby wheelchair and rushed towards them. "What happened?" she asked, helping Marcus lower Ruth gently into the wheelchair. "My grandma can't breathe right," Ellie said, her small hand still clutching Ruth's fingers. "She was fine. Then she just started gasping." Maggie stepped forward. "Possible cardiac event. She's been in respiratory distress for approximately 30 minutes. An ambulance was delayed, so we brought her ourselves." The nurse nodded, already checking Ruth's pulse. "I'll get a doctor right away. Family can follow me, but..." She glanced at Marcus and the other bikers. "The rest of you will need to wait here." Ellie looked up at Marcus with panicked eyes. "Please don't go," she whispered, reaching for his hand. Marcus hesitated, looking from Ellie to the nurse. "I'm with them," he said firmly. Something in his tone made the nurse pause. She took in the protective stance he maintained beside Ellie and gave a quick nod. "Just you then," she conceded. "The rest need to wait outside." Diesel stepped forward. "We'll be in the parking lot if you need anything, Hale." He gave Ellie a gentle nod before leading the others back outside. Ruth was wheeled quickly through double doors and down a hallway. Here's where a team of medical staff was already waiting. A doctor with salt and pepper hair took charge immediately. "Get her into Bay 3. I want oxygen, EKG, and blood work stat," he ordered, checking Ruth's vital signs as they moved. Everything happened in a blur of activity. Ruth was transferred to a bed, oxygen mask placed over her face, monitors attached to her chest. The medical team worked with practiced efficiency, calling out numbers and medical terms that meant nothing to Ellie or Marcus. A nurse guided them to chairs against the wall, out of the way, but still within sight of Ruth. "The doctor will do everything possible," she assured them before hurrying back to assist. Ellie sat stiffly in the hard plastic chair, her small body tense with fear. Her feet, still bare from her desperate run into the street, dangled above the floor, but Marcus noticed they were dirty and slightly scraped. "You're hurt," he said quietly, pointing to her feet. Ellie glanced down, seemingly surprised. "I forgot my shoes," she said, her voice small. Without a word, Marcus shrugged off his leather jacket and draped it around Ellie's shoulders. It swallowed her completely, making her look even smaller. "Thank you for saving my grandma," she whispered, pulling the jacket tighter around herself. Marcus shook his head. "They're saving her now," he said, watching the medical team work. "I just got her here." "Nobody else stopped to help," Ellie said. "Just you." A heavy silence fell between them as they watched the doctors and nurses move around Ruth. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Ellie's small hand found Marcus's rough one, clutching it tightly. He didn't pull away, but finally the doctor stepped back from Ruth and approached them. His face was serious but not grim. Marcus felt Ellie's grip tighten. "Are you family?" the doctor asked, looking between them. "I'm her granddaughter," Ellie said quickly. "Is she going to be okay?" The doctor crouched down to Ellie's level. "Your grandmother had what we call congestive heart failure. Her heart wasn't pumping well, which made fluid build up in her lungs. That's why she was having trouble breathing." "But is she going to be okay?" Ellie pressed, her voice trembling. The doctor smiled gently. "Yes, I think she will be. You got her here just in time. We've started medication to help her heart and remove the extra fluid. She's stabilizing now." Ellie's body sagged with relief, leaning against Marcus's arm. "Joe, can I see her?" "In a little while," the doctor said. "She's resting comfortably now with the oxygen helping her breathe. We're going to move her to a room upstairs where we can monitor her overnight." He turned to Marcus. "You made the right call bringing her in when you did. Another 30 minutes could have made a significant difference. Marcus nodded, feeling something tight in his chest loosen slightly. The doctor patted Ellie's shoulder. Your grandmother is very lucky to have such a brave granddaughter. After the doctor left, Ellie remained pressed against Marcus's side, still wrapped in his oversized jacket. Through the gaps in the curtain, they could see Ruth's chest rising and falling more evenly now, the oxygen mask fogging slightly with each breath. She's the only person I have left, Ellie whispered, with her eyes fixed on her grandmother. Marcus said nothing, but he didn't move away when Ellie's small arms wrapped around him in a tight hug of relief. The hospital quieted as evening settled in. Outside the window of Ruth's room, streetlights flickered on one by one, casting pools of yellow light across the parking lot. Marcus shifted in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, his large frame making the plastic seat seem even smaller than it was. Ruth lay in the hospital bed, her small body nearly lost among the white sheets. The steady beep of monitors provided a rhythmic backdrop to her soft breathing. The oxygen mask had been replaced with a nasal cannula, and some color had returned to her cheeks. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Across from Marcus, Ellie had finally surrendered to exhaustion. She was curled up in a recliner that a kind nurse had brought in, still wrapped in Marcus's leather jacket. Her face, peaceful in sleep, looked even younger than her 9 years. Marcus rubbed his eyes and checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Diesel and a text asking if he needed anything. He typed a quick reply. All good. Staying tonight. Setting the phone aside, he studied Ruth's face. Something had been nagging at him since they arrived at the hospital. Something familiar about her gentle features, the curve of her smile when she briefly woke earlier and saw Ellie. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling he'd seen her before. A memory surfaced, blurry at first, then gaining clarity. A cold night. Rain. He had been 17, maybe 18, on the run after another fight with his stepfather, armed with nowhere to go and nothing but anger keeping him warm. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes widening as the pieces fell into place. That night, he'd been huddled under the awning of a closed shop, soaked to the skin, when a woman had approached. Not young, but not as old as Ruth was now. She'd offered him shelter just for the night. No questions asked. He remembered the small kitchen with yellow curtains, the towel she'd given him to dry off, the bowl of homemade soup that had been the first warm meal he'd had in days. You're not beyond saving, son, she had told him when he'd tried to explain why he couldn't go home. She hadn't pushed, hadn't preached, had simply offered kindness when no one else would. Marcus stared at Ruth, his heart pounding. It was her, it had to be. The same gentle eyes, the same quiet dignity. He'd only stayed that one night before moving on, too proud and too scared to accept more help. But that single act of kindness had stayed with him, a small light in a very dark time. I never thanked you, he whispered to Ruth's sleeping form. A soft knock at the door pulled Marcus from his thoughts. A woman with a clipboard and tired eyes stepped into the room. She wore business casual clothes and had her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Mr. Hale? She asked quietly, glancing at sleeping Ellie. Marcus stood, towering over the visitor. Yeah? I'm Valerie Mendez from Social Services. She extended her hand, which Marcus shook after a moment's hesitation. The hospital contacted us about Ellie Carter's situation. Marcus frowned. What situation? Her grandmother's getting better. Valerie gestured toward the hallway. Marcus followed her out, leaving the door cracked so he could still see inside. Mrs. Carter's condition is stable but serious, Valerie explained. The doctors say she'll need significant recovery time and possibly long-term care. They're concerned about her ability to care for a minor. Ellie said it's just the two of them, Marcus said, glancing back through the door at the sleeping child. That's correct. According to our records, Ellie's parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. Mrs. Carter has been her legal guardian since then. Valerie consulted her clipboard. In cases like this, we need to ensure the child has proper care while the guardian recovers. Marcus crossed his arms. And what does that mean exactly? It means we may need to place Ellie in temporary foster care if Mrs. Carter's recovery is prolonged, Valerie said, her voice professionally sympathetic. It's standard procedure. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Foster care. The very system he'd run from repeatedly as a teenager. The thought of Ellie, trusting, brave little Ellie, being placed with strangers made something protective and fierce rise in his chest. She's not going to foster care, Marcus stated firmly. Valerie's expression didn't change. Mr. Hale, I understand your concern, but unless you're a family member or have established legal standing, you don't have input in this decision. Marcus looked back through the doorway at Ellie curled up beneath his jacket, but then at Ruth, the woman who had once saved him without even knowing it. There has to be another option, he said quietly. The first rays of sunrise filtered through the hospital blinds, painting thin golden lines across the room. Marcus stood outside the hospital's entrance, freshly showered and wearing a clean black t-shirt. He'd left briefly at dawn to change at his apartment and pick up a breakfast. In one hand, he carried a paper bag from Sally's diner containing warm blueberry pancakes, scrambled eggs, and orange juice. In his other hand, he held a small stuffed bear he'd spotted in the hospital gift shop. An impulse purchase that now made him feel awkward. What did he know about kids, or what they might want? The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and coffee. My night shift nurses gave him curious glances as he passed, his heavy boots echoing in the quiet corridor. Outside Ruth's room, Marcus paused. Through the half-open door, he could see Ellie was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the recliner, watching cartoons on the small TV with the volume turned low. Ruth appeared to still be sleeping. Marcus knocked softly on the doorframe. Ellie looked up, her face brightening instantly. "Marcus, you came back!" Her voice carried both surprise and relief. "Course I did," he replied, stepping inside. "Brought breakfast. Figured hospital food might not be too good." He set the paper bag on the rolling table and awkwardly held out the small bear. "Got you this too." Ellie's eyes widened. She reached for the plush toy and hugged it to her chest. "Thank you. I'll name him Ryder because you ride a motorcycle." Something warm and unfamiliar spread through Marcus's chest. He cleared his throat. "Good name." Ellie peeked into the bag, and her face lit up even more. "Pancakes. Grandma makes the best pancakes, but she hasn't been able to make them much lately." Her smile faded slightly as she glanced at Ruth. Marcus pulled up a chair beside Ellie as she dug into the breakfast. "How's your grandma doing this morning?" "The nurse said she had a good night," Ellie said between bites. She woke up for a little bit, but then she got tired again. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "I'm scared, Marcus." Marcus nodded, unsure what to say. Comfort wasn't something he'd had much practice with. "The doctors are taking good care of her." "But what if—" Ellie stopped, her fork hovering over the pancakes. "What if she doesn't get better? The lady yesterday, she said I might have to go somewhere else." The vulnerability in her voice made Marcus's heart clench. "Your grandma's tough, like you." Ellie nodded, but her eyes remained worried. "The social worker lady is coming back today. I heard the nurse talking about it." Marcus frowned. He'd hoped for more time before dealing with Valerie Mendez again. "Don't worry about that right now, okay? Just focus on your breakfast and your grandma." A soft rustling from the bed caught their attention. Ruth's eyes fluttered open, taking a moment to focus on the room around her. "Grandma!" Ellie jumped up, still clutching Ryder the bear. "You're awake!" Marcus stood more slowly, feeling suddenly out of place as Ellie rushed to Ruth's side. Ruth's voice was raspy but clear. "Good morning, sweetheart." Her gaze drifted to Marcus, confusion briefly crossing her face before she smiled weakly. "And good morning to you too, young man. I understand I have you to thank for getting us here." "No need for thanks, ma'am," Marcus said, suddenly conscious of his tattoos and the way his size dominated the small room. Ruth studied him with intelligent eyes. "You look familiar somehow." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "Just got one of those faces, I guess." Before Ruth could respond, there was another knock at the door. Valerie Mendez entered, looking fresh and professional in contrast to her tired appearance the night before. "Good morning," she said, nodding to everyone. "I'm glad to see you're awake, Mrs. Carter. I'm Valerie Mendez from Social Services." Marcus felt a protective instinct surge through him. He moved slightly closer to Ellie, who had tensed at the social worker's entrance. Ruth's expression sharpened despite her weakened state. "Social services? Why would we need social services?" Valerie approached the bed. "It's standard procedure when a child's guardian is hospitalized, Mrs. Carter. We need to ensure Ellie has proper care while you recover." "Ellie has proper care," Ruth said firmly. "She has me." "Of course," Valerie replied smoothly. "But your recovery might take some time, and we need to consider—" "She has me too," Marcus interrupted, surprising himself as much as everyone else. The words had come out before he could think them through. He felt all eyes in the room turn to him. Valerie's expression was skeptical. "And you are?" "He's Marcus," Ellie said before he could answer. "He saved Grandma, and he brought me breakfast and Ryder." She held up the bear as evidence. Marcus met Valerie's gaze steadily. "I'm a friend, and I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon, Marcus pulled his motorcycle into the cracked driveway of Ruth and Ellie's small house. The social worker had reluctantly agreed to let Ellie stay with her grandmother at the hospital for the day. But Marcus couldn't shake the worry that had settled in his chest. The phrase, temporary placement, kept echoing in his mind. He sat on his bike for a moment, taking in the modest home. The pale yellow paint was peeling in large patches. Several roof shingles hung precariously, and the small front porch sagged in one corner. The yard was neat but sparse, with more dirt than grass. A single flowering bush by the steps provided the only color. Marcus pulled a small notepad from his jacket pocket. He'd promised Ruth he'd check on the house and bring Ellie some fresh clothes. What had started as a simple favor was becoming something more, though he couldn't quite name what. The key Ruth had given him felt strangely heavy in his hand as he approached the front door. It stuck slightly in the lock before turning with a reluctant click. "Hello?" Marcus called out of habit, though he knew the house was empty. His voice echoed in the quiet space. Inside, the home was clean but worn. The furniture was old but well cared for, with hand-crocheted blankets draped over the back of a faded blue sofa. Family photos lined the walls, many showing Ellie at different ages, some with a couple Marcus assumed were her parents, and several of a younger Ruth. Marcus moved deeper into the house, making notes. The kitchen faucet dripped steadily. a cabinet door hung by one hinge. The refrigerator hummed loudly, working too hard. He opened it to find it nearly empty. Just some milk, half a loaf of bread, and a few apples. In the small bathroom, he discovered water damage around the toilet and a shower that leaked. The hallway led to 2 small bedrooms. Ruth's was tidy and simple, while Ellie's was painted light purple with books stacked on a small desk and stuffed animals arranged carefully on her bed. Marcus sat on the edge of Ellie's bed, feeling oversized and out of place among the unicorn posters and fairy lights. He spotted a framed photo on her nightstand, Ellie with a man and woman, all 3 smiling widely. Her parents, he realized, were the people she had already lost. A wave of protectiveness washed over him. This little girl had been through enough. He wouldn't let her lose her home too. Marcus gathered some clothes for Ellie as promised, finding a small backpack decorated with butterflies to pack them in. He added the photo from her nightstand, guessing she might want it at the hospital. Back in the kitchen, Marcus made another list. Groceries this time. Then he headed to his bike. 3 hours later, Marcus returned with his saddlebags full of tools and supplies. He'd stopped at the hardware store and the grocery store, spending more than he'd planned at both. He started with the kitchen faucet, replacing the worn washer that caused the drip. The cabinet door came next. It just needed stronger screws and adjustments to the hinges. But he cleaned the refrigerator's coils, reducing its labored humming to a quieter purr. In the bathroom, he resealed around the toilet and fixed the shower's leaky faucet. Each repair was small, but together they made a difference. The house felt less neglected, more cared for. As the afternoon light began to fade, Marcus unloaded groceries into the once empty refrigerator and cupboards. Simple things that wouldn't spoil. Canned soup, pasta, cereal, and fresh fruit. He wasn't sure what Ellie liked, so he'd bought a variety. On the counter, he left a note. Fixed a few things. Food in the fridge. We'll bring more clothes tomorrow. Marcus. He stood in the kitchen for a moment, looking around. The house was still old and worn, but it felt different now. It felt like someone was watching over it. As Marcus locked up and headed to his bike, but he realized he was watching over more than just the house. He was watching over Ellie's world, trying to hold it together until Ruth could come home. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt right in a way few things in his life ever had. The morning sun cast long shadows across the elementary school parking lot as Marcus shifted uncomfortably on his motorcycle. He'd traded his usual leather jacket for a plain black one, still intimidating, but less adorned with patches that might raise eyebrows. The school bell would ring any minute, and his stomach knotted with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Nervousness. Parents gathered in small clusters, chatting and laughing, occasionally glancing his way with undisguised curiosity. Marcus kept his distance, leaning against his bike, trying to look casual despite feeling completely out of place. When the bell finally rang, children poured from the building in a chaotic stream of backpacks and voices. Marcus straightened up, scanning the crowd for Ellie's familiar face. The hospital had released Ruth into a care facility for monitoring, and the social worker had reluctantly agreed to let Ellie stay in her home with Marcus checking in on her, at least for now. Marcus! Ellie's voice cut through the noise as she spotted him. Her face lit up with a smile that made the stares from other parents fade into the background. She ran toward him, her purple backpack bouncing against her small frame. When she reached him, she stopped just short of hugging him, suddenly shy. Hey, kiddo, Marcus said, awkwardly patting her shoulder. How was school? It was okay. Ellie shifted from foot to foot. Mrs. Davis let me make a get-well card for Grandma. Can we take it to her today? Marcus nodded. That's the plan. We'll go after we get you some dinner. A woman approached them, her teacher's lanyard swinging as she walked. You must be Marcus, she said, extending her hand. I'm Mrs. Davis, Ellie's teacher. She's told us about you. Marcus shook her hand, wondering what exactly Ellie had said about him. Nice to meet you. Ellie mentioned her grandmother is in the hospital. I just wanted to check if there's anything we can do to help. That's kind of you, Marcus said, surprised by the genuine concern in her voice. I think we're managing okay for now, Mrs. Davis smiled. Ellie's a resilient girl. She's handling everything remarkably well. She turned to Ellie. Don't forget about your math homework, sweetie. Ellie groaned. Do I have to? Yes, you do, Mrs. Davis and Marcus said simultaneously, surprising them both. After the teacher walked away, Marcus handed Ellie a helmet he'd bought specially for her, smaller than his, with purple butterflies that matched her backpack. For me? Ellie asked, eyes wide. Can't ride without proper safety gear, Marcus said gruffly, helping her adjust the straps. We'll take the bike to the diner, then the car to visit your grandma. That okay? Ellie nodded enthusiastically. I told my friends my babysitter rides a motorcycle. Josie didn't believe me. Babysitter? Marcus raised an eyebrow, half amused. Ellie shrugged. Well, what are you then? Marcus had no answer for that. But he wasn't family. He wasn't exactly a friend. Let's just go with Marcus for now. The ride to the diner was short, but seemed to delight Ellie, who held tight around his waist. Marcus drove more carefully than he ever had in his life. At the small local diner, they settled into a booth by the window. Ellie carefully removed her helmet, her hair wild with static. What sounds good? Marcus asked, scanning the menu. Grandma usually makes me eat vegetables, Ellie said thoughtfully. But she's not here. Marcus tried to look stern. Nice try. Pick something with vegetables. Ellie sighed dramatically but smiled. Chicken fingers and broccoli? Deal. After they ordered, Ellie pulled out her homework and a pencil. She stared at the math problems with a furrowed brow. Need help? Marcus offered, surprising himself. Oh, it's fractions, Ellie said with disgust. They're hard. Marcus slid around to her side of the booth. Let me see. For the next 15 minutes, while they waited for their food, Marcus patiently explained fractions, using sugar packets from the table as visual aids. He'd never considered himself good at math, but the simple problems brought back memories of his own school days. You're pretty good at explaining stuff, Ellie said, completing the last problem. Better than Mrs. Davis. Don't tell her that, Marcus said with a small smile. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Ellie dunked her chicken fingers in ketchup while Marcus worked on his burger. Do you think Grandma will be home soon? Ellie asked suddenly, pushing her broccoli around her plate. Marcus considered his answer carefully. The doctors need to make sure her heart is stronger first, but she's getting good care. Ellie nodded, accepting his answer. I'm glad you're staying with me. I didn't want to go to a foster home. The simple statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. He cleared his throat. Eat your broccoli, kid. Ellie made a face but speared a piece with her fork. You know what? This isn't so bad. Us having dinner together. It's like we're a family or something. Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and took another bite of his burger, ignoring the unexpected warmth spreading through his chest. The next day, gray clouds hung low in the sky as Marcus waited in the school parking lot. He'd arrived 15 minutes early, parking his motorcycle at the far edge of the lot. He sat on a bench near the school doors, and feeling out of place among the minivans and SUVs that filled the spaces around him. As more parents arrived, he noticed the glances. A mother in a floral dress whispered to another, their eyes darting toward him before quickly looking away. Two fathers stood by a truck, one nodding in his direction while speaking in hushed tones. Marcus had spent most of his adult life being stared at. He was used to it. But this felt different. These weren't the usual looks of fear or caution his leather vest and tattoos typically drew. These were concerned parents wondering about the strange man picking up one of their children's classmates. A woman with short blonde hair approached, clutching her purse a little tighter as she neared him. "You're Ellie Carter's guardian?" she asked, her voice polite but strained. Marcus nodded. "Just helping out while her grandmother recovers." "I'm Jessica Wright, PTA president, Mia's mom." She gestured toward the school. "We haven't seen you around before." "First time for everything," Marcus said, keeping his voice neutral. "It's just that, well, we all know Ellie's situation is difficult. Ruth is such a wonderful woman." Jessica shifted her weight. "The community is concerned, that's all." Marcus met her eyes directly. "Ellie's doing fine. She's got what she needs." Before Jessica could respond, another mother joined them. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, giving Marcus a suspicious glance. "Just introducing myself to Ellie's—" Jessica paused, searching for the right word. "Friend," Marcus supplied firmly. "I'm a friend of the family." The school bell rang, saving him from further questioning. Where children began spilling out the doors, their voices filling the air with excited chatter. Marcus stood, scanning the crowd for Ellie's familiar face. When she emerged, her expression fell. She spotted him, but instead of yesterday's enthusiasm, her steps were hesitant. She glanced around, noticing the parents watching them, some openly staring. "Hey, kiddo," Marcus said when she reached him. "Ready to go?" Ellie nodded silently, keeping her eyes on the ground. They walked to where his motorcycle was parked. Marcus handed her the butterfly helmet, but Ellie just held it, her fingers tracing the designs. "Something wrong with the helmet?" he asked. "No." Her voice was small. "My friend Mia said her mom told her you're dangerous, and that you're in a gang." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the feeling of being judged before being known. He knelt down to Ellie's level, meeting her worried eyes. "What do you think? Am I dangerous?" Ellie shook her head. "You helped Grandma. You fixed our roof. You make sure I eat vegetables." A small smile briefly touched her lips. "That's not dangerous. That's nice." Marcus nodded. "Sometimes people judge by how someone looks, not by what's in their heart." "Like a book cover," Ellie said. "Mrs. Davis says never judge a book by its cover." "Smart lady." Ellie looked over her shoulder at the parents still watching them. "But what if they make you leave? Miss Watson, the social worker, she didn't seem to like you either." Marcus heard the real fear in her voice. With her grandmother still in care, he was her only constant. The thought of her worrying about being alone again made something protective stir inside him. "Listen to me," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere, okay? Not because of what other people think or say." "Promise?" Ellie's voice wavered. "I promise!" Marcus meant it with a certainty that surprised him. "Now how about we get some ice cream before we visit your grandma?" Ellie's face brightened slightly. "With sprinkles?" "Extra sprinkles," Marcus confirmed, helping her secure her helmet. As they prepared to leave, Jessica Wright approached again, her expression uncertain. Ellie, honey, if you ever need anything, all the parents have a phone tree. We can help? Before Marcus could respond, Ellie spoke up. Thank you, Mrs. Wright. But I have Marcus. She wrapped her small arms around his waist in a quick hug that caught him off guard. He promised he'd stay, and he keeps his promises? The simple faith in her voice silenced whatever Jessica had been about to say. She nodded, stepping back as Marcus started the motorcycle. As they pulled away from the school, Ellie's arms tight around his waist, Marcus felt something shift inside him, a determination that went beyond a simple promise. For the first time in years, someone believed in him completely. He wouldn't let her down. The hospital corridor felt different in the evening hours. The daytime bustle had settled into a quieter rhythm of soft footsteps and muted conversations. Marcus walked beside Ellie, carrying a small vase of wildflowers they'd picked on their way. The girl clutched a handmade card, or her fingers nervously smoothing its edges as they approached Ruth's room. "Do you think Grandma will like my drawing?" Ellie asked, holding up the colorful paper covered with crayon illustrations of their house, a rainbow, and 3 stick figures labeled me, Grandma, and Marcus. "She'll love it," Marcus assured her, his voice soft in the hushed hallway. "It's beautiful." They paused outside Ruth's door. Through the small window, Marcus could see her still form beneath the white hospital blanket, various machines tracking her vital signs with steady beeps and glowing numbers. "Remember what the nurse told us," Marcus reminded Ellie gently. "Grandma needs rest, so we'll stay quiet, okay?" Ellie nodded solemnly. "I'll be super quiet, like a mouse." Marcus opened the door, and they stepped inside. The room smelled of antiseptic and the faint sweetness of the flowers other visitors had brought. Ruth lay still, her silver hair spread against the pillow, her face peaceful despite the oxygen tube beneath her nose. "Hi, Grandma," Ellie whispered, approaching the bedside with cautious steps. "I brought you a card." Ruth didn't stir. Ellie looked up at Marcus, her disappointment clear. "She's sleeping really deep to help her body heal," Marcus explained, setting the wildflowers on the bedside table next to other arrangements. "We can still talk to her. Sometimes people can hear even when they're asleep." Ellie nodded, carefully propping her card against the water pitcher. She pulled a chair close to the bed and began speaking in hushed tones about her day at school, about the ice cream they'd had, and about how Marcus had taught her to identify different wildflowers. Marcus hung back, watching the one-sided conversation with a lump in his throat. He thought about how easily his life could have continued without ever crossing paths with these two. How many turns in the road, how many coincidences had brought him back to Ruth, the woman who'd shown him kindness when he was just a scared, hungry kid. As Ellie chattered, Marcus noticed a slight change in Ruth's breathing. Her eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. She blinked several times, adjusting to the dim light of the room. "Grandma?" Ellie gasped, then immediately lowered her voice. "You're awake." Ruth's lips curved into a weak smile. "Hello, sunshine," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus moved forward, standing behind Ellie. Should I get the nurse?" Ruth shifted her gaze to him, and a look of gentle curiosity crossed her face. "No, not yet." Her words came slowly, each one carefully formed. "Let me see my girl first." Ellie carefully took her grandmother's hand, mindful of the IV line. "I made you a card, Grandma. See? That's our house, and there's you and me and Marcus." Ruth studied the drawing with tender attention, then looked up at Marcus again. Her eyes, though tired, were clear and focused. "You're the man who helped us," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus answered. "Just happened to be there." Ruth shook her head slightly. No such thing as just happened in this world. She reached out her free hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Marcus took it. Her fingers felt fragile in his calloused palm. "Thank you," she said. "Sorry for looking after my Ellie." "It's nothing," Marcus replied, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Ruth studied his face, her gaze surprisingly direct and penetrating for someone so weak. There was no recognition of him as the boy she'd once helped. That memory seemed lost to time. But something in her expression suggested she saw beyond his rough exterior. "You've got kind eyes," she whispered, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. Marcus felt a strange tightness in his chest at her words. Before he could respond, Ruth's eyelids grew heavy. She smiled once more at Ellie, her fingers loosening their grip as she drifted back to sleep. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Hal's Diner, a weathered roadside establishment where truckers and bikers had been filling their bellies for decades, where the neon "Open 24 Hours" sign buzzed faintly, competing with the rumble of motorcycles parked in a neat row. Marcus sat in a corner booth, his large frame hunched over a mug of black coffee. The vinyl seat creaked as he shifted, glancing at his watch. The diner buzzed with morning chatter, but he barely noticed. His thoughts kept drifting back to Ellie and the way Ruth had looked at him last night. "You've got kind eyes," she had said. Those words had followed him home, echoing in his mind as he tossed and turned in his empty apartment. The bell above the door jingled, and Marcus looked up to see Bear walking in. 6'4", with a barrel chest and a beard that reached mid-torso, Bear had earned his nickname honestly. He spotted Marcus and nodded, stopping to slap a few brothers on the back before making his way to the booth. Morning, brother," Bear said, sliding in across from Marcus. His voice was surprisingly gentle for a man his size. "Got your message. Sounded important." The waitress appeared, pouring Bear a coffee without asking. She'd known these men for years and understood their routines. "Thanks for coming," Marcus said, waiting until the waitress left before continuing. "I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't run their mouth to the whole club." Bear's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. "That's serious, huh?" Marcus wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "You remember that little girl and her grandmother I helped last week?" Bear nodded. "Hard to forget. The guys are still talking about how you organized that motorcycle escort to the hospital. Real heroic stuff." Marcus waved off the compliment. "Mom, I've been checking in on them. The grandmother, Ruth, she's still in rough shape. The girl, Ellie, she's all alone." "Social services getting involved?" Bear asked, adding 3 sugars to his coffee. "Yeah. There's talk about foster care if Ruth doesn't recover enough." Bear stirred his coffee, watching Marcus carefully. "And this concerns you because—" Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm thinking of applying for guardianship." The spoon in Bear's hand stopped mid-stir. He set it down carefully and leaned back, crossing his massive arms. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Say that again." "You heard me?" Marcus said, meeting his friend's gaze. "I want to take care of Ellie, maybe permanently." Bear scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Marcus, we've been brothers for what, 15 years? I've never known you to even keep a plant alive. Now you want to raise a kid?" "It's different," Marcus insisted, his voice low but intense. "This girl, there's something about her. She's brave and smart and—" He struggled to find the right words. "She needs someone, Bear. Someone who won't bail when things get tough." "And that someone is a Hell's Angel with a record?" Bear's tone wasn't judgmental, just practical. Marcus stared into his coffee. I know how it sounds. Do you? Bear leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. Think this through, brother. What you're talking about, it's not just babysitting. It's PTA meetings and doctor appointments and teenage drama down the road. I know that. Do you also know what the club will think? Bear's voice dropped even lower. We've got a certain lifestyle, and certain expectations. Being a full-time daddy doesn't exactly fit with midnight runs and weekend rallies. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. The club is family too. That's right, Bear said, nodding slowly. And family understands loyalty. What you're talking about, it's choosing a different path. He reached across the table, putting a meaty hand on Marcus's arm. You can't be both, Marcus. Not fully. The moment that little girl needs something during a club obligation, you'll have to choose. And once you start choosing her over the club, well... The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Marcus had never considered life outside the Brotherhood. For 15 years, it had been his anchor, his identity. The boys won't understand, Bear continued. Some might even take it as disrespect. But you're a patched member, Marcus. That means something. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. What would you do? He asked finally. Bear sighed, his expression softening. I can't answer that, but I can tell you this. Whatever you decide, it'll cost you something. Either way, you'll be giving up part of who you are. That afternoon, Marcus pulled his motorcycle into Ruth and Ellie's driveway. The front yard looked better than it had a week ago. He'd spent Sunday morning mowing the overgrown grass and trimming back the unruly bushes that had nearly swallowed the walkway. He climbed off his bike, removing his helmet and running a hand through his hair. Bear's warning still echoed in his mind. You can't be both. The words had followed him all morning, a shadow he couldn't shake. Inside, Aunt Ellie sat at the kitchen table working on homework. Her face brightened when she saw him. Marcus, I got a B+ on my spelling test. She held up a paper covered in gold stars. That's great, kid, he said, his voice gruff but warm. Smart as a whip, just like I figured. He set down a bag of groceries and began unpacking them. Milk, bread, fresh fruit, things he'd noticed were missing from their fridge. He'd never been much of a shopper before, but now he found himself noticing sale signs and checking expiration dates. The doorbell rang, and Ellie jumped up. I'll get it. Wait, Marcus said, a protective instinct kicking in. Let me. He opened the door to find a woman in her 40s with a sleek bob haircut and a clipboard. She wore a navy blazer that screamed government official. Mr. Hale? She asked, with her eyes taking in his leather vest and tattoos. That's me, he answered, standing straighter. I'm Sandra Wells, Ellie's caseworker. She extended a hand that Marcus shook carefully. I understand you've been involved in Ellie's situation. Marcus stepped back, inviting her inside. Just helping out where I can. Ellie appeared behind him. Ms. Wells, Marcus fixed our roof and taught me how to change a tire yesterday. Sandra's eyebrows rose slightly. Did he now? That sounds very educational. Marcus recognized the tone, the polite skepticism he'd faced his whole adult life. Would you like some water? He offered, trying to be hospitable. No, thank you. This is an official visit to assess Ellie's living situation. She turned to Ellie with a practiced smile. Sweetheart, why don't you show me your room while Mr. Hale and I talk? As Ellie led the social worker down the hallway, Marcus took a deep breath. He'd faced down rival gangs and police interrogations, but somehow this woman with her clipboard made his palms sweat. When Sandra returned, she gestured toward the kitchen table. Could we sit for a moment? Marcus nodded, pulling out a chair for her before taking his own seat. Sandra placed her clipboard on the table. Mr. Hale, I appreciate citizens who step up in a crisis. What you did for Ruth was commendable. Anyone would have done it, he said, though they both knew that wasn't true. But this, she gestured around the house. This ongoing involvement raises questions. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Like what? Like why a member of the Hells Angels is suddenly playing house with a 9-year-old girl. Her voice remained professional, but the words cut. I'm not playing anything, Marcus said, keeping his voice even. Ellie needs help. Her grandmother's sick. I'm just filling in. Sandra consulted her notes. According to hospital records, you have no relation to this family. Not by blood, Marcus admitted, and yet you've taken it upon yourself to become quite involved. She looked up. Neighbors report you've been here daily, bringing groceries, making repairs. The place needed work, he said. Ruth can't do it, and Ellie's just a kid. Sandra studied him. Mr. Hale, I've run a preliminary background check. Your record is concerning. Marcus's jaw tightened. That was a long time ago? Not long enough for the system, she replied. And your current associations don't help your case. What case? He asked, though he already knew. Sandra set down her pen. Let's be direct. I've heard from hospital staff that you've been asking questions about guardianship options. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. Marcus didn't deny it. Mr. Hale, I need to be clear, Sandra continued, her voice firm but not unkind. Your criminal record and current affiliations would make formal guardianship virtually impossible. The state has strict requirements for who can care for vulnerable children. People can change, Marcus said quietly. Perhaps. She gathered her papers. But the system doesn't easily recognize that change. I'm warning you now. If you're forming attachments or making promises to Ellie, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And worse, you might be setting her up for another loss. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the hospital corridor as Marcus and Ellie walked out of Ruth's room. The visit had been quiet. Ruth remained asleep, her breathing steady but weak. Ellie had held her grandmother's hand and talked about school, while Marcus sat in the corner chair, a silent guardian. Now, as they headed toward the parking lot, Marcus noticed Ellie's slumped shoulders. These hospital visits were hard on her. Too many white walls and beeping machines for a 9-year-old to handle. Hey, Marcus said, his voice gentler than it had been in years. You hungry? Ellie shook her head, eyes fixed on the ground. How about we take a break then? Do something different? She looked up at him, curious. And like what? Marcus thought for a moment, remembering the old bike he'd spotted in their garage yesterday. You ever ride your bike at Riverside Park? It's not far from here. I can't, Ellie said, kicking at a pebble. My bike's broken. The chain keeps falling off. Marcus smiled. That's an easy fix. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to Ellie's house. Marcus led her to the garage and turned on the light. Dust motes danced in the air as he found the small pink bike tucked behind boxes of Christmas decorations. This yours? He asked, wheeling it out. Ellie nodded. Grandma got it for my birthday last year, but it stopped working right. Marcus flipped the bike upside down, balancing it on its handlebars and seat. He examined the rusty chain and loose rear wheel. Hand me that toolbox over there, he said, pointing to a shelf. Ellie brought the box and sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, watching as Marcus's large hands worked with surprising gentleness on the delicate bike parts. My dad used to fix things, she said suddenly, before the accident. Marcus paused, looking at her. She rarely mentioned her parents. Yeah? Was he good at it? He could fix anything. Ellie picked at a loose thread on her jeans. Grandma says I have his hands. Marcus noticed her small fingers, already capable and sure when she helped him organize his tools. I believe that. As he worked, he showed her what he was doing, tightening the bolts, adjusting the chain tension, oiling the rusty spots. She asked questions, her natural curiosity pushing past the sadness that had clouded her face earlier. There, he said finally, turning the bike right side up. Want to test it out? Ellie nodded eagerly. Can we really go to the park? Sure thing. Marcus loaded the bike into the back of his pickup truck, borrowed from a fellow club member for the day. He'd known his motorcycle wouldn't work with Ellie and a bike. At Riverside Park, the spring day had drawn families to the playgrounds and picnic areas. Marcus felt eyes on him as he unloaded the bike. Stares from parents who noticed his leather vest and tattoos. He'd grown used to it over the years, the way people moved their children slightly away when he passed. But today, with Ellie bouncing excitedly beside him, the stares bothered him more than usual. Let's find a good spot to ride, he said, guiding her away from the main playground toward a paved path that circled a small pond. But Ellie climbed onto her bike, suddenly hesitant. What if it breaks again? It won't, Marcus assured her. And if something goes wrong, I'm right here. She pushed off, wobbly at first, then with growing confidence. Marcus walked alongside, ready to catch her if needed, but Ellie soon found her balance, pedaling faster. Look at me, Marcus, she called, her pigtails flying behind her. I see you, kid, he said, a smile breaking across his weathered face. You're doing great. Ellie circled back around, skidding to a dramatic stop in front of him. It works perfect now. Watch how fast I can go. She took off again, leaving Marcus to jog after her. The path curved around ancient oak trees, their branches creating dappled sunlight patterns on the ground. Ellie swerved playfully through them, her laughter floating back to him. It was a sound he hadn't heard enough from her. Pure, uninhibited joy, without the weight of worry that usually shadowed her eyes. As he watched her circle the pond, racing with her own reflection on the water's surface, Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This moment, this simple, perfect moment of a child enjoying a bike ride on a sunny day, was something he'd never expected to be part of his life. Ellie looped back around, braking dramatically beside him. Did you see how fast I went? Like lightning, Marcus said, grinning. She laughed again, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep and untouched by all the sadness she'd faced. For just this moment, she was simply a 9-year-old girl with a working bike, and the whole park ahead of her. The afternoon glow had faded into evening shadows by the time Marcus's truck pulled into the hospital parking lot. Ellie still wore the afterglow of their park adventure, her cheeks flushed with the memory of wind rushing past as she pedaled around the pond. She clutched a small paper bag containing a chocolate chip cookie they'd bought on the way back, a treat she planned to share with her grandmother. Maybe Grandma will be awake tonight, she said, hopping down from the passenger seat. Her voice carried a lightness that hadn't been there that morning. Maybe, Marcus answered, not wanting to dim her hope, but knowing Ruth had been sleeping more and more during their visits. As they walked through the automatic doors, something felt different. The usual quiet hum of the evening hospital routine seemed charged with tension. A nurse Marcus recognized from previous visits hurried past without her usual smile of recognition. Ellie noticed, too. Her small hand slipped into Marcus's large one, something she'd never done before. Her fingers felt tiny against his calloused palm. "Why is everyone running?" she whispered. "Hospitals are always busy," Marcus said, trying to sound casual while an uneasy feeling settled in his stomach. He'd spent enough time in emergency rooms after club fights to recognize the distinct energy of urgency. They took the elevator to Ruth's floor. When the doors opened, the difference was unmistakable. The nurses' station buzzed with activity, and a doctor Marcus hadn't seen before was reviewing charts with intense focus. "Something's wrong," Ellie said, her voice small. The paper bag crinkled in her tightening grip. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Let's go see Grandma." As they approached Ruth's room, a nurse emerged, looking harried. She spotted them, and her expression shifted to something Marcus couldn't quite read. Concern mixed with compassion. "Oh, you're here," she said, her voice softly professional. "The doctor wanted to speak with family when you arrived." Marcus felt Ellie's hand trembling in his. "Is my grandma okay?" she asked. Her earlier joy completely vanished. The nurse placed a gentle hand on Ellie's shoulder. "Dr. Rivera will explain everything. He's with your grandmother now. You can go in." Marcus led Ellie into the room, the familiar antiseptic smell now mixed with something more urgent. The room had more equipment than before. New monitors with glowing numbers and lines that meant nothing to Marcus, but spoke of increased medical concern. Ruth lay still against the white sheets, her face ashen. A doctor stood beside her bed, making notes on a tablet. He looked up when they entered, his eyes landing first on Ellie, then shifting to Marcus with a brief flicker of assessment. "Hello, Ellie," he said kindly, clearly recognizing her from previous visits. "And you must be Marcus. I'm Dr. Rivera." Ellie moved closer to the bed, still clutching her paper bag. "Why is Grandma so still?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Dr. Rivera set his tablet down and pulled a chair closer for Ellie. "Why don't you sit down, sweetheart? I need to talk to you and Marcus about your grandmother's condition." Marcus felt a cold weight settling in his chest as he helped Ellie into the chair. He remained standing, one hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "There's been a change in Ruth's condition," Dr. Rivera began, his tone gentle but direct. "The medication we've been using to help her heart isn't working as well as we'd hoped. This afternoon she experienced what we call an arrhythmia. Her heart wasn't beating properly." Ellie looked up at Marcus, confusion and fear mixing in her eyes. He squeezed her shoulder, silently urging the doctor to use simpler terms. Dr. Rivera seemed to understand. "Her heart is very tired," he explained. "We gave her medicine to help, but her body is having trouble responding. Her breathing became more difficult. And to help her rest and heal, we had to put her into what we call a medically induced coma." "A coma?" Ellie's voice cracked. The paper bag fell from her hands, the cookie inside forgotten. "It's like a very deep sleep," Dr. Rivera said. "It gives her body a chance to focus all its energy on getting stronger without having to do other things, like stay awake or talk." Marcus found his voice. "What are her chances?" he asked, the question rough in his throat. The doctor met his eyes directly. "The next 24 hours will be critical. I wish I could give you more certainty, but Ruth's heart is very fragile." Ellie stood up suddenly, moving to her grandmother's bedside. Ruth's face looked peaceful, despite the oxygen mask and the various tubes connecting her to the machines. Ellie carefully took her grandmother's limp hand. "I brought you a cookie," she whispered. "I'll save it for when you wake up." Morning arrived with gray clouds hanging low over the hospital. Marcus hadn't left. He'd spent the night in the uncomfortable vinyl chair beside Ruth's bed, one eye on the steady rise and fall of her chest, the other on Ellie, who had finally fallen asleep curled up in the recliner the nurses had provided. The night nurse had brought Ellie a blanket, and Marcus a cup of black coffee that now sat cold and untouched on the windowsill. Neither of them had wanted to leave Ruth, and the hospital staff, seeing the fear in Ellie's eyes, had bent the rules. Marcus stretched his stiff back. His leather jacket made a poor pillow, and his shoulders ached from the awkward position. But physical discomfort was nothing compared to the knot of worry tightening in his chest as he watched Ruth's pale face, so still beneath the oxygen mask. Ellie stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For one brief moment, there was peace in them before reality crashed back. "Is Grandma better?" she asked, her voice small and scratchy with sleep. Marcus moved to sit beside her. "No change, kiddo, but that's not bad news. The doctors are still helping her." Ellie nodded, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her hair stuck up in wild directions, and dark circles shadowed her young eyes. Marcus resisted the urge to smooth down her hair, still not entirely comfortable with such gestures. "Are you hungry?" he asked instead. "I could go find us some breakfast." Before Ellie could answer, the door opened. Marcus expected a nurse or doctor, but instead, a woman in a neat gray pantsuit entered, followed by the social worker who had spoken to them previously. The knot in Marcus's chest tightened further. "Good morning," the woman in gray said, her voice professionally pleasant. "I'm Patricia Winters from Child Protective Services. This is my colleague, Ms. Bennett, whom I believe you've met." Ms. Bennett nodded at them, her expression carefully neutral. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, standing up. His instinct was to move between these women and Ellie, though he fought against it, knowing it would only make things worse. Patricia glanced at the monitors attached to Ruth, then back to Marcus. "Given Mrs. Carter's critical condition and the uncertainty of her recovery, we've come to temporarily place Ellie with a foster family until the situation stabilizes." Ellie's blanket dropped to the floor as she stood. "No, I want to stay with Marcus." Her voice rose with panic. Ms. Bennett stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Ellie, we understand this is scary, but we need to make sure you're properly cared for while your grandmother is sick. Marcus is taking care of me." Ellie's eyes filled with tears. "Please don't make me go." Patricia set her briefcase on the small table by the window. "Mr. Hale has no legal standing as your caretaker, Ellie. And while we appreciate his assistance during this emergency, proper procedures need to be followed." Marcus felt his hands curl into fists. He forced them to relax. "There's got to be something we can do. She's been through enough already." Patricia removed some papers from her briefcase. "You're welcome to apply for temporary guardianship, Mr. Hale, but that process takes time and evaluation. Meanwhile, we have a lovely family ready to take Ellie today. They're experienced foster parents who live just 20 minutes from this hospital." "Today?" Marcus's voice came out harsher than intended, and he saw Ms. Bennett flinch slightly. "She hasn't even had breakfast." "They're waiting downstairs," Patricia said, "and they've promised to bring Ellie back to visit her grandmother daily." Ellie rushed to Marcus's side, clinging to his arm. "Please don't let them take me," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Marcus!" The pain in her voice cut through him like a knife. He knelt down to her level, aware of the women watching. "Listen to me," he said quietly, holding her small shoulders. "This is just temporary, okay? I promise I'm going to fix this." "But what about Grandma? What if she wakes up and I'm not here?" "I'll be here," Marcus assured her. "I won't leave her alone, and I'll tell her exactly where you are and that you'll be back to see her soon." Patricia cleared her throat gently. "Ellie, do you have any belongings you need to collect?" Ellie shook her head, tears still falling. "Just my backpack at home." "We'll stop by your house to pick up some clothes and things you need," Ms. Bennett said. Marcus watched helplessly as the women helped Ellie into her jacket. She looked so small, so vulnerable. Every instinct in him screamed to take her and run, but he knew that would only make things worse. "I'll see you tomorrow, right?" Ellie asked, or her voice breaking. "Count on it," Marcus promised. As they led her toward the door, Ellie broke away for a moment and ran back to Ruth's bedside. She stood on tiptoes to kiss her grandmother's cheek. "I'll be back soon, Grandma," she whispered. "Please get better." Then she was being guided out the door, looking back at Marcus with red-rimmed eyes full of betrayal and fear, until the door closed behind her. The afternoon sun slanted through the dusty windows of Ruth and Ellie's home as Marcus turned the key in the lock. He'd stayed at the hospital for hours after they took Ellie, watching Ruth's chest rise and fall, hoping for some change, some sign. But the doctors had finally shooed him out, telling him to get some rest. Rest. As if he could rest now. The door swung open with a familiar creak. But the house felt different without Ellie's boundless energy filling its corners. No pattering feet, no curious questions, no small hand slipping into his as they walked from room to room. Just silence. Marcus stood in the entryway, his large frame making the modest home seem even smaller. The living room was exactly as they'd left it yesterday morning. Ellie's school books spread across the coffee table, a half-finished drawing of what looked like a motorcycle with a stick figure rider. He picked up the drawing, his calloused fingers gentle against the paper. She'd colored the rider with a black crayon and given him a big smile. Next to the figure, in wobbly letters, she had written, "Mr. Marcus." His throat tightened. He set the drawing back down carefully, as if it might break. On the kitchen still had their breakfast dishes in the sink, the cereal bowl Ellie had used, the coffee mug he'd drunk from. Marcus turned on the faucet and began washing them, needing to do something, anything, with his hands. The mundane task couldn't distract him from the hollow feeling in his chest. When he finished, he dried his hands on a faded dish towel and wandered back through the living room. The house had problems. A leaky roof, windows that rattled in the wind, outdated wiring that sometimes made the lights flicker. He'd been fixing things bit by bit, but there was still so much to do. Marcus climbed the stairs slowly, his boots heavy on each step. At the top landing, he paused outside Ellie's bedroom door. It was partially open, showing a glimpse of her small bed with its purple comforter thrown hastily aside from yesterday morning. A row of stuffed animals watched him from a shelf, their button eyes seeming to ask, "Where is she?" He didn't enter. It felt wrong somehow, like trespassing. Instead, he moved to Ruth's room at the end of the hall. Unlike Ellie's colorful space, Ruth's bedroom was neat and simple. A single bed with a patchwork quilt, a wooden dresser, and a small desk beneath the window. Photos lined the walls. Ellie as a baby, Ellie on her first day of school, Ellie and Ruth together at what looked like a county fair. And there, on the bedside table, a photo he hadn't noticed before. A young couple holding an infant. Ellie's parents, he guessed. The people Ruth had stepped in to replace when tragedy struck. While Marcus sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the mattress creaked beneath his weight. What was he doing here? Playing house? Playing hero? The social worker's words echoed in his mind. Men like you don't become guardians. Maybe she was right. Maybe Ellie would be better off with a real family, not a washed-up biker with a record. His gaze drifted to Ruth's desk. Bills were stacked neatly in one corner. Medical records, insurance papers, the paperwork of a life lived responsibly. Everything he'd spent years avoiding. Something caught his eye, a worn wooden box at the back of the desk. Curiosity pulled him toward it. He sat in the small chair, feeling oversized and out of place, and carefully opened the lid. Inside were letters, newspaper clippings, small mementos, things Ruth had kept throughout her life. Marcus wasn't one to pry, but as he moved to close the box, a yellowed piece of paper slipped free and fluttered to the floor. He leaned down to pick it up and froze when he recognized his own childish handwriting. It was the note he'd left her, over 30 years ago, when he was just a scared, hungry kid she'd taken in for the night. "Thank you for the food and blanket. Nobody ever was nice to me before." He remembered writing it, remembered leaving it on her kitchen table before slipping out at dawn, too afraid to stay longer, too untrusting of kindness. But beneath his scrawled words was something else. Ruth's neat handwriting, added later. "You matter more than your past. I pray you find your way, dear boy." She'd kept it, all these years. Marcus's vision blurred. He blinked hard, clutching the paper carefully between his fingers. Their Ruth hadn't just helped him once. She'd carried hope for him for decades, never knowing if he'd made it, never knowing if her kindness had mattered. But it had. It had changed everything. Marcus slipped the note into his pocket and stood up, his shoulders straightening, his purpose clear once more. That night, the rumble of motorcycles and the smell of oil, leather, and cigarettes surrounded Marcus in the familiar confines of the biker clubhouse. The place had been his second home for more years than he cared to count. A scratched wooden bar stretched along one wall, neon beer signs casting blue and red shadows over the faces of men he'd ridden with through storms, fights, and long highways that seemed to stretch forever. Marcus sat alone at a corner table, nursing a soda while most of his brothers drank harder stuff, or the ice clinked against the glass as he turned it slowly, lost in thought. The note from Ruth felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. "You look like you're at a funeral, not a Friday night," said a gruff voice. Marcus glanced up to see Bear, one of the oldest members of their chapter, sliding into the seat across from him. Bear had earned his nickname from his size and the wild beard that covered most of his face. Despite his intimidating appearance, he was one of the few who had openly supported Marcus's involvement with Ellie. "Might as well be," Marcus replied, his voice low. Bear signaled to the bartender for a drink. "The little girl?" Marcus nodded. "They took her today. Foster care." The words felt bitter on his tongue. "Ruth's still in a coma. Our doctors don't know if she'll pull through." Tough break. Bear stroked his beard thoughtfully. "So what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" Marcus spread his hands on the table. The social worker made it pretty clear. "My record, this life," he gestured around the clubhouse, "doesn't exactly scream responsible guardian." Bear leaned forward, his massive forearms resting on the table. "Since when do you let someone else tell you what you can and can't do?" A few tables away, laughter erupted as someone told a joke. The jukebox switched to an old rock song. Life was continuing as normal in the clubhouse, but Marcus felt miles away from it all. "It's different this time," Marcus said. "It's not just about me." "Exactly." Bear took a long drink. "It's about the kid." Marcus pulled the note from his pocket and smoothed it on the table, careful not to damage the aged paper. "Ruth wrote this to me when I was just a scared kid myself. You matter more than your past." Bear read it and handed it back with surprising gentleness. "Wise lady. She believed in me when no one else did." Marcus tucked the note away safely. "And now her granddaughter needs someone to believe in her. So what's stopping you?" Marcus looked around the clubhouse, taking in the faces of men who had become his family. They'd ridden together, fought together, protected each other. But taking on Ellie meant walking away from this world. The social worker had been clear. His association with the club would always be a mark against him. "You know what's stopping me?" Marcus said quietly. Bear nodded slowly. "Knows the Brotherhood." The front door banged open, and several more bikers entered, bringing a blast of cool night air. They called greetings to Marcus, who raised his glass in acknowledgement. "These guys have been my family for 20 years, Marcus continued. "Walking away." He shook his head, unable to finish the thought. "Sometimes family means knowing when to let go," Bear said, surprising Marcus with his insight. "My old man was the worst kind of drunk. Best thing my mom ever did was walk away from him. Saved us both." He paused. "Sometimes the hardest choice is the right one." Marcus stared into his glass, seeing Ellie's face reflected in the dark liquid. He thought about her reaching out from the social worker's car, her small hand pressed against the window, tears streaming down her face as they took her away. When he pushed back from the table and stood up suddenly, the decision that had been weighing on him for days suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity. "I'm going after her," he said, his voice stronger now. "I'm going to fight for guardianship." Bear raised an eyebrow. "You know what that means." "Yeah," Marcus nodded, looking around at the clubhouse one last time, memorizing the faces, the sounds, the feeling of belonging he'd found here. "It means I'm out. Clean break. The guys won't like it." "Probably not," Marcus agreed. "But that little girl needs me more than they do, and I need her." He took a deep breath. "I'm done with this life. As of tonight, I'm leaving the club." The morning sun streaked through Marcus's apartment windows as he sat at his small kitchen table, surrounded by papers. He'd been up since dawn, making lists, writing down names, and trying to figure out where to start. His leather vest hung on a hook by the door. The first time in years it hadn't been on his back or beside his bed. He ran a hand over his stubbled face. The decision had been made, but the path forward was full of roadblocks. His record wasn't terrible, but it wasn't clean either. Bar fights from his younger days, a few misdemeanors, and the association with the motorcycle club would all count against him. "One step at a time," he muttered, picking up a pen. First on his list, legal help. He needed someone who could navigate the system better than he could. Marcus reached for his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Liam Parker was a lawyer who'd helped a few club members in the past. He wasn't cheap, but he was fair. Marcus took a deep breath and made the call. "Parker Law Office," a crisp voice answered. "This is Marcus Hale. I need to speak with Liam about a guardianship case." There was a pause. "One moment." While waiting, Marcus looked at the second item on his list. Character references. He needed people who would vouch for him, who would stand up in court if needed and say he was responsible enough to care for a child. The problem was, most people who knew him were bikers, and that wouldn't help his case. "Marcus?" Liam's voice came through the phone. "It's been a while. What's this about guardianship?" Marcus explained Ellie's situation, Ruth's condition, and his decision to seek legal guardianship. He didn't mention leaving the club. That was private business. "That's a tough road," Liam said when Marcus finished. "Your background will be scrutinized, every detail." "I know," Marcus replied, "but I'm ready for that." "Are you?" Liam's tone was doubtful. "Because they'll dig deep, and your association with the—" "That's over," Marcus cut in. "As of last night." A long silence followed. "You're serious? Dead serious? This little girl needs me." Liam sighed. Okay. I can help you file the paperwork, but you'll need more than that. You'll need character witnesses, a steady income, a suitable home environment, and you'll need to clean up any outstanding legal issues. Marcus wrote everything down. I've got 2 old tickets I never paid. I'll take care of those today. Good start. What about witnesses? Who can speak to your character? Marcus stared at his blank paper. I'm working on that. After finishing the call, Sir Marcus grabbed his jacket, not his club leather, but a plain denim one, and headed out. His first stop was the courthouse to pay those tickets. Next, the bank to check his savings. If he was going to convince a judge he could support Ellie, he needed to show financial stability. By noon, Marcus had paid his outstanding fines and opened a separate savings account specifically for Ellie's future needs. It wasn't much yet, but it was a start. His next stop was the hospital. Though Ruth was still unresponsive, he wanted to check on her condition and see if any of the staff might remember him from the emergency. The nurse at the station looked up as he approached. "You're the motorcycle man," she said, recognition lighting her eyes. "The one who brought in Mrs. Wilson and stayed with her granddaughter." Marcus nodded. We're surprised she remembered. "How is she doing?" "No change," the nurse, her tag read Nancy, said with a sad smile. "But she's fighting." "Just like her granddaughter," Marcus replied. Nancy studied him. "You've been coming every day, haven't you, even when visiting hours are over?" "Trying to," she tilted her head. "You know, we all noticed. Most people would have dropped off the little girl and gone back to their lives. But you stayed." Marcus shifted uncomfortably under her approving gaze. "I heard they took Ellie into foster care," Nancy continued. "That's a shame. She was doing so well with you." Marcus hesitated, then decided to take a chance. "Actually, I'm trying to become her guardian. I could use people who would vouch for me." Nancy's eyebrows rose. "You're serious?" "Very," she smiled. "Well, you've got my support. I've seen how you are with her, and Dr. Matthews mentioned just yesterday how impressed he was with your emergency response skills." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. "Would you be willing to write that down? For the court?" "Absolutely. And I bet Dr. Matthews would too." As Marcus left the hospital, his phone buzzed with a text from Liam. "We need more character references. Anyone else who can vouch for you?" Marcus thought for a moment, then turned toward the neighborhood where Ellie and Ruth lived. He remembered the elderly neighbor who had waved to him several times as he fixed Ruth's porch, and the grocery store owner who had helped him select proper food for a 9-year-old. Small connections, but they mattered now more than ever. By the end of the day, Marcus had 5 names on his list. People who had seen him with Ellie, who had witnessed his care for her, who were willing to stand up and say that this former Hell's Angel deserved a chance to be a guardian. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Marcus stood in front of the bathroom mirror, fumbling with his tie. The reflection staring back at him seemed like a stranger. Clean-shaven, hair trimmed neat, wearing a navy blue suit that Liam had insisted he buy for the hearing. His large hands, used to gripping handlebars and wrenches, felt clumsy with the unfamiliar fabric. "Third time's the charm," he muttered, undoing the knotted mess and trying again. Today was the day. After 2 weeks of preparation, character statements, home inspections, and paperwork, Marcus would finally stand before a judge and ask for the right to be Ellie's guardian. A knock at his apartment door startled him, or he checked his watch, still an hour before he needed to meet Liam at the courthouse. "Coming," he called, abandoning the tie for the moment. He opened the door to find Jake, his oldest friend from the motorcycle club, standing there in jeans and a plain black t-shirt. No club colors or patches. "Thought you might need some moral support," Jake said, his eyes taking in Marcus's transformation. "And maybe some help with that tie." Marcus stepped back to let him in. "Didn't expect to see you." Jake shrugged. "The others might not understand what you're doing, but I do." He gestured toward the bathroom. "Let me help you with that before you strangle yourself." Back at the mirror, Jake's steady hands worked the tie into a perfect knot. Marcus stood still, grateful for the help and the silent support. "How's the little girl?" Jake asked. "Mar's in temporary foster care. I get to see her twice a week for supervised visits." Marcus's jaw tightened. "She asks about Ruth every time." "Any change there?" Marcus shook his head. "Still in a coma. Doctors say it could go either way now." Jake finished with the tie and stepped back. "There. Now you look almost respectable." His attempt at humor fell flat, but Marcus appreciated it anyway. "Thanks." "You got everything you need? Papers? Witnesses?" Marcus nodded toward a folder on the kitchen table. "Liam helped organize it all. Got statements from the hospital staff, neighbors, even Ellie's teacher." "And what about you? You ready for the questions they'll ask?" Marcus took a deep breath. "As ready as I can be." Jake clasped his shoulder. "Just remember why you're doing this. And keep that little girl's face in your mind when they start digging into your past." "I will." After Jake left, Marcus gathered his paperwork and checked his apartment one last time. The place looked different now. He'd cleared out anything that might raise eyebrows during the home inspection: old motorcycle parts, questionable artwork, anything connected to his club days. He'd added a small desk in the spare bedroom with children's books and art supplies. A stuffed bear sat on the freshly made bed. He'd even hung a picture Ellie had drawn during one of their visits: a colorful house with 3 stick figures standing outside. She'd labeled them Me, Grammy, and Mr. Marcus. Marcus touched the drawing gently before heading out. The drive to the courthouse took 20 minutes. Though he parked his pickup truck, borrowed from Jake since his motorcycle wouldn't create the right impression, and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Everything had happened so fast. From the moment Ellie had run into the street begging for help until now, barely a month had passed. Yet in that short time, his entire life had been turned upside down. He'd walked away from the only family he'd known for over 20 years. He'd rewritten his future plans. He'd opened his heart to a 9-year-old girl who needed him. And now he was about to ask a judge to believe that a former Hell's Angel could be a suitable guardian. Marcus checked his watch and got out of the truck. Liam was already waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps, briefcase in hand. "You look good," Liam said, nodding approvingly at the suit. "Remember what we practiced. Direct answers, no excuses about your past. Focus on what you can provide for Ellie now." "Got it." They climbed the steps together, Liam reviewing key points while Marcus focused on keeping his breathing steady. Inside, the courthouse was busy, people moving between courtrooms and offices with purpose. "Courtroom 3, Liam said, guiding him down a hallway. As they approached the heavy wooden doors, Marcus spotted the social worker who had taken Ellie away. She was speaking with another woman in a business suit, likely from child services. They both looked up as Marcus approached, their expressions guarded. Liam touched his arm. "Ready?" Marcus straightened his shoulders and nodded. This wasn't just any fight. It was the most important one of his life. And he wasn't walking away. The courtroom fell silent as Marcus took the stand. The polished wooden furniture and formal atmosphere felt foreign to him after years in the rough world of motorcycle clubs. Judge Eleanor Bennett watched him with practiced neutrality, her silver-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. "Please state your full name for the record," she said. "Marcus James Hale." "Mr. Hale," the state attorney began, "you're petitioning for temporary guardianship of Eleanor Carter, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said, his deep voice steady despite the nervous beating of his heart. "And you've known Eleanor for how long exactly?" Marcus looked directly at the attorney. "Just under 5 weeks, ma'am." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Marcus spotted several faces he recognized: hospital staff, neighbors, but even the school principal who had written a statement on his behalf. "5 weeks," the attorney repeated with emphasis. "And in that time, you believe you formed a sufficient bond to justify becoming her guardian?" Marcus took a breath. "When you save someone's life, there's a connection that happens. It's not about time." "Mr. Hale, your record indicates membership in the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club for over 20 years. Would you describe that as a suitable environment for raising a child?" Liam stood up. "Objection. My client has formally separated from the club." "Overruled," Judge Bennett said. "The question speaks to Mr. Hale's background and judgment. You may answer, Mr. Hale." Marcus nodded, remembering Liam's advice. "No excuses, just honesty." "No, ma'am, it wouldn't be suitable. That's why I left." Marcus's hands rested on his knees, steady now. "I know what my record shows. I know what people see when they look at me. But when Ellie ran into that street asking for help, I didn't hesitate. And every day since then, I've been trying to be the kind of person she needs." The attorney walked closer. "And what makes you think you can provide stability for a child? You have no experience as a parent." "You're right," Marcus admitted. "I don't have experience. But I know what it's like to be alone. I know what it's like to have nobody fighting for you." His voice grew quieter. "Ellie's grandmother, Ruth. She helped me once when I was younger. Just for one night. But it mattered. She showed me kindness when nobody else would." The judge leaned forward slightly. "I can give Ellie a safe home," Marcus continued. "I can make sure she goes to school, gets her homework done, eats proper meals. I can be there when she needs someone, and I can love her like family because that's what she is to me now." For the next 20 minutes, the questioning continued. Marcus answered each question truthfully, without hiding from his past or making promises he couldn't keep. When he finally stepped down, he felt drained but relieved. He'd said what was in his heart. Several witnesses followed: the hospital nurse who had seen Marcus's daily visits to Ruth, neighbors who testified to the improvements he'd made to the house, even Jake, who spoke about Marcus's character despite their different paths. Finally, the bailiff called, "Eleanor Carter." The side door opened, and Ellie walked in with a social worker. She wore a blue dress and white shoes, but her hair pulled back with a matching ribbon. Her eyes found Marcus immediately, lighting up with recognition. "Hello, Ellie," Judge Bennett said gently. "Do you understand why we're all here today?" Ellie nodded. "You're deciding who I'm going to live with until Grammy gets better." "That's right, and I need to ask you a few questions. Is that okay?" "Yes, ma'am." The judge smiled. "You've been staying with Mrs. Peterson for the past 2 weeks. Has she been taking good care of you?" "Yes," Ellie said. "She's nice, but it's not home." "And where is home to you, Ellie?" "With Grammy." Ellie's voice wavered. "But she's still sleeping in the hospital." Judge Bennett nodded. "I know this is difficult. Do you understand that we need to find someone to take care of you until your grandmother recovers?" "Yes." Ellie's eyes drifted to Marcus again. "You've spent some time with Mr. Hale. How do you feel when you're with him?" Ellie didn't hesitate. "Safe." She twisted her hands in her lap. "When I couldn't find anyone to help Grammy, I was so scared. But then Marcus stopped his motorcycle and followed me home. He knew what to do. He fixed things." "What kind of things did he fix?" "The roof that was leaking, the steps that were wobbly. He made dinner and helped me with my math homework." Ellie's voice grew stronger. "And he visits Grammy every day with me. He tells her stories about his motorcycle trips so she won't be lonely." The judge considered this. "Ellie, if you could choose who to stay with until your grandmother gets better, who would you choose?" Ellie stood up from her chair, her small face suddenly determined. "I choose him," she said, pointing directly at Marcus. Tears welled in her eyes. "Please let me stay with Marcus. He promised he wouldn't leave me, and he hasn't." The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Judge Bennett removed her glasses and placed them carefully on the bench in front of her. Her eyes moved from Ellie to Marcus, then to the stack of papers before her. Reports, character statements, and legal documents that would determine a child's future. Marcus sat perfectly still, his large hands resting on his knees. The suit he wore felt too tight around his neck, but he didn't fidget. In his mind, he replayed Ellie's words. "I choose him." 3 small words that carried the weight of the world. So Ellie had returned to her seat beside the social worker, her small shoulders squared with a bravery that made Marcus's chest ache. She glanced back at him, and he gave her the slightest nod. Whatever happened, he would be okay. He needed her to know that. The judge shuffled some papers, making notes with a silver pen. The scratch of it against paper was the only sound in the otherwise silent room. Marcus counted his heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. The clock on the wall ticked forward. Mrs. Peterson, Ellie's temporary foster mother, sat 3 rows back. She was a kind woman with soft eyes who had treated Ellie well. Marcus had no ill feelings toward her. She caught his gaze and gave him a small, encouraging smile. Judge Bennett finally looked up. "I'd like to take 15 minutes to review my notes before giving my decision. Court will resume at 11:45. The gavel struck, and the room filled with murmurs and the rustle of movement. Marcus remained seated as his lawyer, Liam, leaned over. "You did well," Liam said quietly. "Very well." Marcus nodded, unable to find words. The hope rising in his chest felt dangerous. He'd learned long ago not to expect good things. Life had taught him that lesson repeatedly. Jake, his former club brother, approached cautiously. He stood awkwardly in the aisle, his own attempt at formal clothes looking as uncomfortable as Marcus felt in his. "Whatever happens," Jake said, "you stood up. That counts for something." "Thanks for coming," Marcus replied. Jake nodded once and moved away, giving Marcus the space he needed. The 15 minutes stretched like hours. Marcus watched Ellie across the room, talking quietly with the social worker. She kept stealing glances his way, her face a mix of hope and fear that mirrored his own feelings. Finally, the bailiff called the court back to order. Everyone settled into their seats as Judge Bennett returned, her face unreadable. "In the matter of temporary guardianship for Eleanor Carter," she began, "I have reviewed all submitted evidence, witness testimony, and the recommendations before me." She looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Hale, the court recognizes that your past contains elements that would typically raise concerns in a guardianship case." Marcus's heart sank, but he kept his face composed for Ellie's sake. "However," the judge continued, "the court also recognizes the extraordinary circumstances of this case. The bonds formed in crisis can be among the strongest. Your actions since meeting Eleanor demonstrate a commitment and care that cannot be dismissed." She glanced down at her papers once more. "The home study confirms you've created a safe, appropriate environment. Your voluntary separation from previous associations shows commitment to this new path, and the character witnesses who have come forward speak highly of your reliability and integrity, despite your unconventional background. The judge placed both hands flat on the bench before her. Most importantly, Eleanor herself has expressed her wishes clearly and convincingly. Marcus barely breathed. It is therefore the decision of this court to grant temporary guardianship of Eleanor Carter to Marcus Hale, so pending quarterly reviews and the continued progress of rehabilitation services for Ruth Carter. The gavel struck with finality. Court is adjourned. For a moment, Marcus couldn't move. The words echoed in his mind, too wonderful to fully grasp. Liam clapped him on the shoulder, saying something Marcus couldn't process. Across the room, Ellie had already jumped to her feet. The social worker tried to hold her back for a proper dismissal, but Ellie pulled away. Her face lit up with pure joy as she ran down the center aisle toward Marcus. Marcus rose and knelt down just in time as Ellie crashed into his arms. He caught her, holding her close as she wrapped her arms tightly around his neck. "You're staying with me," she whispered fiercely. "You're staying." "I'm staying," Marcus promised, his voice rough with emotion. "We're going home, kid." The hospital hallway felt different that evening. The harsh fluorescent lights seemed softer somehow, casting a gentle glow that matched the quiet peace settling over Marcus. He walked slowly, Ellie's small hand in his, their footsteps echoing against the polished floor. Ellie wore her best dress, a simple blue one with tiny flowers that Ruth had bought her last Christmas. Her hair was neatly brushed, tied back with a ribbon. Marcus had helped her get ready, his large fingers surprisingly gentle as he attempted to tie a proper bow. "Do you think Grandma will know?" Ellie asked, looking up at Marcus. "About today, I mean." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "I think she might. Sometimes people know things, even when they can't say so." The paper bag in his other hand crinkled as they walked. Inside was a photo album Ellie had insisted on bringing. Pictures of her with Ruth, moments captured in time that told the story of their love. They paused outside room 318. The door was partially open, and the soft beep of machines drifted out. Marcus knelt down to Ellie's level, meeting her eyes. "Remember what the doctor said? Grandma Ruth might not be able to talk back to us, but she can hear you. You can tell her anything you want." Ellie nodded solemnly. "I know. I've been thinking about what to say all afternoon." Marcus felt a swell of pride at her courage, 9 years old and facing what grown men feared, with a strength that humbled him. They entered the room quietly. Ruth lay in the hospital bed, her small frame barely making a dent in the mattress. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow but steady, where the sunset through the window painted golden streaks across the white blanket covering her. A nurse checking the monitors smiled gently at them. "Her vitals have been stable today," she said softly to Marcus. "Take all the time you need." She slipped out, closing the door behind her. Ellie approached the bed slowly. "Grandma?" she whispered. "It's me, Ellie." Marcus hung back, giving her space for this moment. He watched as Ellie carefully placed her small hand over Ruth's. "I brought our pictures to show you," she continued. "And I have big news, really big news." She glanced back at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "The judge said I can stay with Marcus. He's going to take care of me now." Her voice grew stronger. "He's really good at it, Grandma. He fixed the roof and the sink, and he helps me with my homework, even though math makes him grumpy." A ghost of a smile seemed to touch Ruth's pale lips, though her eyes remained closed, And you don't have to worry about me being lonely anymore. Marcus says we're a team now." Marcus moved closer then, standing behind Ellie with his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "Hello, Ruth," he said softly. "I don't know if you remember me from all those years ago. I was just a scared kid then, and you showed me kindness when nobody else would." His voice roughened. "I never forgot that night. Never forgot what you said to me." Ellie looked up curiously. "What did she say?" Marcus smiled down at her. "She told me I mattered more than my past. And she was right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the worn piece of paper he'd carried for decades. Ruth's handwritten note that had given him hope when he had none. "I promise you, Ruth," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I'll take care of her. I'll give her a good life. She'll be loved and protected every day." As if responding to his words, Ruth's eyelids fluttered open. Her gaze, though clouded, found Ellie's face first. A smile spread slowly across her features, weak but unmistakably joyful. "Ellie," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Grandma!" Ellie leaned closer. "You're awake!" Ruth's gaze shifted to Marcus, and a spark of recognition flickered in her eyes. Not of the boy he had been, but of the man he had become. "Thank you," she breathed. Marcus nodded, the unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Ruth's hand moved slightly, reaching for both of them. Ellie slipped her fingers into her grandmother's grasp, and Marcus gently covered both their hands with his own. They stayed that way as the sunset deepened to dusk. Ruth's breathing grew more peaceful, her face more restful. The monitors beeped steadily, then more slowly. In that quiet room, with her granddaughter's hand in hers and the knowledge that Ellie would be safe, Ruth Carter took one final peaceful breath and let go. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.